Hi, Pocket. The more new slang I learned in this one, blame my mentors. In Monster Hunter Wilds, there are plenty of items you can use and craft: healing, traps, ammo. If you played the game, especially in multiplayer, you're probably familiar with a lot of them, but there are some I hardly see mentioned, and maybe that's for a good reason. Here are a few of the more niche items you can use in Monster Hunter Wilds, and what their advantages are. Poison smoke bombs are great, and can serve as a good way for non-poison weapons to get some free damage throughout a hunt. But we're not talking so much about the poison ones. We're talking about the smoke bombs that are completely healthy for monsters to breathe. The ordinary smoke bomb. The description of the item reads as follows. Creates a large cloud of smoke when thrown against the ground that can hide you from a monster's sight. Leaving combat on the fly is something hunters can already do with the ghillie mantle, and is mainly used for grabbing sneak attacks or taking a breather in an intense fight, but ghillie mantle has a 5-minute cooldown. Sneak attack also has a 5-minute cooldown, so you should always have it available, but in case you don't, or if something happens to the ghillie mantle, smoke bombs can be used to grab a sneak attack again. The effect is similar to that of the spore puff, which releases a cloud of smoke, but it seems like the spore puff is generally more responsive than the smoke bomb in my experience. There are 4 raw meats that you can set on the ground for monsters to eat. One raw meat that does nothing, a poisoned one for poison, a tinged one for paralysis, and a drugged one for sleep. But if you put this meat down in the world, nothing will happen. See, monsters don't really get hungry on their own. They're very diligent, very reserved. They won't simply eat a piece of meat laid perfectly on the ground for them if they find it in the world. Heavens no. They might gain weight. Now is not the time for a snack. In order for a monster to seek out these meats, they must be exhausted. You can tell if a monster is exhausted by this little icon that comes off of them on the minimap. The method of exhausting monsters is a little weird, but basically, monsters have a hidden stamina meter that they use when fighting the hunter. Over time, the stamina meter can run out, and hunters can lower the stamina meter with blunt damage or exhaust ammos and coatings, and the stamina thief skill is made just for that. An exhausted monster is considerably less threatening, and luring it into some meat for a free paralysis, sleep, or poison sounds pretty good, right? Unfortunately, it's not too practical. Monsters like to enrage all the time in Wilds, and when a monster is enraged, it gets to ignore stamina and regenerate for a bit. You can tell a monster is enraged by the little red eye next to them on the minimap. Conversely, if the eye is yellow, the monster is not enraged. Monsters will enrage after taking certain amounts of damage. I learned this more thoroughly when trying to get clips of monsters eating these raw meats. Even with a hammer, a blunt weapon, with 3 points of stamina thief, I would go an entire hunt without seeing a monster get exhausted, simply because it would continuously enrage itself. After one enrage ended, I'd briefly see the eye turn yellow, before immediately turning red again. Generally speaking, when wailing on a monster you're fairly equipped for and comfortable with, even geared to the teeth with stamina-related damage, it won't ever get exhausted because it's too busy getting mad or getting dead. Now this is great news for Agitator users, a skill that buffs the hunter's damage and affinity when a monster is enraged. I ran around this Gormagala for 30 minutes and it did not leave enrage at all. How frustrating. Yes, I cooked, and no one ate. Thus, I was cooked. This is unfortunate. I'd love to see more uses for these. Maybe being able to plant them in a location and then hide with ghillie, or use it to put a monster to sleep before luring a monster to wake it up for big damage. These tools could be great to prep with, but functionally, right now, they feel a little unimpactful to me. I'd love to hear if you have any creative uses for these. Tranq bombs are well known enough, but Tranq Blades are a little different. The crafting recipe is 1-to-1 with Tranq bombs, simply attaching a Tranq bomb to a throwing knife. Not only does it make it so that you can fire Tranqs at monsters from afar, it also means you can Tranq monsters with your weapon drawn, because we can fire with the slinger without sheathing. Apart from that, it's not horribly useful as far as I've tested. It's a good step in a cool direction though, and I hope we get to do more interesting things with the throwing knife in the future. Augmenting it maybe with ailments or more damage. Maybe we'll get some equipment skills that buff it, I don't know. Whetfish fins can be used to sharpen your weapon instead of a whetstone. Ordinarily, the whetstone does 3 passes and then a big shing for bonus sharpness at the end. Whetfish fins can give a good way to shorten this, reducing it to 2 passes before the shing, and a Whetfish Fin Plus can reduce it even further to a single pass. This is a great way to supplement sharpness without having to invest in the speed sharpening skill, which has the same effect. Especially if you're going for something like protective polish and you want to be sharpening all the time, having these fins saved up and on hand can find a lot of practical use. Of course, if you're a ranged weapon user, sorry, completely useless for you, but maybe you can rub the fins on your gun barrel for good luck. I checked, and the fins can be used just like the whetstone while your weapon is out, as long as they are placed on the radial menu. Thank you for watching. Are there any items you feel are niche that maybe get underrepresented? Let me know. Is there a method I missed? That too. I'll see you soon, fellow hunters. Good luck, Godspeed, and goodbye.